Hi guys, I'm Mike.
And I'm Stephen.
And this is F1 Fanatics. Welcome back to the first race review podcast of the F1 2020 season.
Oh, yeah, finally.
It is on and under the way. It's unbelievable. And obviously, usually Ashes on these ones, it'll be a kind of a mix of match of when we can fit it in around his work on that front. But you have me and Stephen today. Yeah. It's one of the three of us on the channel in terms of rotating on the policy there. But we're back. And if you don't know how the race review podcast works, well, we've had a bit of a mix-up of things. Just because it's a new season, give you a little bit of variation from there. So how we're going to do this is we will give a race run through of where the classification order was finished. Then what me and Stephen are going to do is we're going to go through the teams from Williams upwards all the way to Mercedes with everyone in between there and talk about each individual team and how they did kind of across the board of the weekend. We'll then have a kind of special feeder series section, which is a new addition to it, where we're just going to talk about kind of the start, well, note the performers of the weekend, the winners, and probably give a notable performance of the week as well, before, you know, just rounding off with our driver of the day and what we will give the race rating as a whole. And then obviously, you know, we'll leave the comments down to you guys to get in the discussion below. And if you're new around here or haven't done so already, please do click that subscribe button if you like what we do. And if you want to kind of find out what we have to say, yeah, make sure you kind of subscribe and you can keep up to date with all our latest content coming out on the channel. Right, I think that's enough of an intro.
Yeah, let's jump straight into it.
Boom! Just like the classic race reviews. Anyway, the race classification of the F1 2020 Austrian GP. Well, technically Austrian GP Mark 1. So coming in at P1, getting the first 25 points of the season was Valtteri Bottas. But if that was predictable that a Mercedes won, after that, nothing else was predictable. Charles Leclerc managed to secure P2. Now, if you obviously hadn't paid attention to the rest of the weekend and just the race result, that may not be a surprise to see a Ferrari there after last year. That's where his position. But if you saw the Ferrari, how it drove that weekend, that is an incredible performance.
Yeah,
by Charles Leclerc. And if you obviously check out our driver ratings, it is we gave him a 10. Well, we'll let you find out. We'll leave a link to the description, a link to that video in the description down below. Lando Norris completed the podium in P3. That was a massive shock and an incredible performance by Lando Norris as well. Lewis Hamilton in P4 after suffering a 5-second penalty with a collision with Albon. Carlos Sainz in P5. Sergio Perez P6. Also after suffering a 5-second penalty, although being left out on the medium compound and not pitting under safety car, he probably would have fallen to that position anyway. Pierre Gasly was in P7, Esteban Ocon P8, Giovinazzi P9 and Sebastian Vettel rounding off the point scorers for the race in P10. Nicholas Latifi, the only other driver to complete the race, in P11. And Kvyat and Albon classified in 12th and 13th respectively, but both failed to finish the race. The other retirees came with Kimi Raikkonen when his tyres went walkabout. Russell had a gearbox issue. Grosjean and Magnussen both suffered brake issues, forcing them to retire from the race. Lance Stroll had an engine issue that forced him to retire. Ricciardo had a cooling issue, forced him to retire. And Verstappen had an electronics engine issue, I think it was, which basically his car was still going, but it kept on kind of not getting out of anti-stall, and he was forced to retire, and the first retiree of the race. But that is the classification of the race that we had on Sunday. So, fair to say, there were some unusual results in there.
Yeah, well, let's start with 11 only finished. It's 2020. It feels like the 1980s.
Yeah, I know we've been doing a lot of classic race reviews in the break of racing, but that's something more we expect to kind of see from those times.
Obviously, Hockenheim last year was an exception. Maybe we're going to have one a year.
But this was like genuine reliability
Yeah,
issues.
it wasn't rain.
No,
rain.
it was just like cars were dropping like flies out there, and even cars that finished the race were still suffering from reliability issues, which I'm sure we'll come around to speaking to when we get on those teams. So starting off with Williams, Nicholas Latifi's debut in Formula 1, and George Russell, his now second full season, well, the start of his second full season in Formula 1. Mixed fortunes for the both. Probably both of them throughout.
Russell was looking great until his engine problem. He was ahead of Sebastian Vettel, so you'd think in the end he could have nicked a point there, his first point for Williams. Latifi, he wasn't far off Russell's pace. He got messed up a bit, not double stacking during a safety car, and then he couldn't catch up with the safety car pack. So he was already 10 seconds behind through no fault of his own. But he got it round, kept the car going. P11 could have picked up a point if there was another retirement.
He stayed out of trouble, didn't he? And in your first race, he crashed in FP3. And, you know, I think he just wanted to get this first weekend out the way before kind of pushing on. And he very nearly kind of got points just by getting the car round and completing the race.
Kubica in Hockenheim. It was just needed that one more car to go.
He was just kind of there. But in fairness, I am quite glad. Not because I don't think, you know, Williams or Nicholas Latifi deserve a point, but I do feel, I felt it was hard done by that Kubica got the point instead of George Russell last year. And it would have been very frustrating for George when he was driving the kind of wheels off that Williams. If Nicholas Latifi in his debut had managed to secure more points for Williams and in F1 than he had, it would have been slightly harsh on George, I think. But you wouldn't have begrudged Nicholas Latifi on debut too much. But
so progress at Williams, but still at the back.
Yeah, George Russell was having a fantastic race until that retirement. Yeah. That's all you can really say. But moving on to, we'll look at our second team, and that is Alfa Romeo. And
again, mixed fortunes.
One
survived, one retired. Kimi, I think it was after a safety car, clearly messed up on the pit stop, hadn't attached the tyre properly, so when they got going again and he put some power through the car, the tyre just went, nope. And just left. But at that point, Kimi was slower than Gio. So Gio, pretty good performance in that Alpha. But he finished 9th in the end, beat his experienced teammate.
Yeah. Well, he's got a big year ahead of him, Giovinazzi, and he needed to come out the blocks flying. Because, you know, he had a good back end to last year. He was out-qualifying Kimi, and he out-qualified Kimi again in this one, but both Alphas going out in Q1. The Ferrari powered engined cars, we'll come on to that probably when we talk about Ferrari, were really struggling. It looks like that Ferrari power unit is very slow. F1 released like a time graphic, and all the kind of Ferrari powered cars were quite significantly slower than what they were last year.
Progress.
Or not, as it would say. But yeah, Kimi was unlucky, but Giovinazzi getting 2 points in a season that could be very close and very marginal. Again, just kind of got the car round, out of trouble, genuinely was fighting Sebastian Vettel and kept him behind him. It was an impressive drive from the young Italian driver.
Very good. Guess now we jump onto another Ferrari-powered car, the Haas, who didn't have mixed fortunes. They just had bad fortunes, or brake fortunes. Maybe you could say both cars having brake failures.
It was rather amusing because, I mean, it seemed obvious. It wasn't like an amazing call to go from it. But we were watching, obviously, Ocon was battling K-Mag at the time, and he'd gone on the inside. And then suddenly you're aware that K-Mag has just kept going. And then I was like, Stephen was like, he just forgot to brake. And I was like going, well, it looks like probably his brakes have failed there. And lo and behold, he suffered a brake failure. He did quite well, actually, to stop the car.
Pretty spectacular stop without flying into the barriers.
Yeah, it was very impressive, and you know that's in a week where obviously if someone seriously bins it, I imagine they're massively limited.
Yeah.
Saving that car and only having to worry about the problem, which is the brakes, he's actually done his team a massive favour.
Yeah. Well, they've only got 4 days till practice starts again.
Exactly. So it is a very quick turnaround in terms of that. But yeah, Grosjean had gone off on a driver error anyway. He hadn't had a great day at the office.
Yeah. And then just had brake failure into turn 4.
But, you know, the brakes were clearly being a problem. It may be...
His first spin may have been a result of the car. But, yeah. Not a great day for either of them. The Grosjean did beat K-Mag in qualifying, but yeah.
Yeah, Grosjean beat K-Mag in qualifying, but K-Mag actually had a fantastic start to the race.
As usual. Classic Magnussen form.
Yeah, I think he was actually running in P12 at the time.
Yeah, it was like 16th to 12th, yeah. Or 13th, yeah.
So he was doing fantastic in the race, and it's a real shame to kind of see what he might have done as well. But we'll move on to the next one, which will be Alpha Tauri. Now, Alpha Tauri from the weekend, just from what we've seen, there was a bit of drama as well with another kind of tyre action. But both drivers were pretty solid. Qualifying was 12th and 13th. Gasly out qualifying his teammate Kvyat. In the race, they were pretty similar running positions as well before the retirement. And I actually think, well, it must have been because Kvyat's tyre exploded and he lost his rear suspension at the end.
Yeah, possibly because of contact with Ocon.
Exactly, so Ocon must have been behind to have made that contact. So he was behind his teammate Pierre Gasly, who finished in 7th. So if it was a 7th and 8th without that kind of rear tyre failure, it would have been a fantastic result for them.
Would have put them quite high up in the midfield because they were they would have been one of the few teams to get both cars home. But unfortunately, Kvyat suffering that late accident.
You didn't really see much from AlphaTauri within this race.
No.
But I think where it looks like they are is they're kind of in this league of their own, where I think in some races they're going to be able to compete with the Racing Points, McLarens and Renaults on like a good driver performance. They're comfortably ahead of Haas, Alfa Romeo and Williams for me. So they're kind of just there.
Yeah.
They're existing.
May throw in some surprise results. There'll just be a bit of a... Yeah.
So I think just an overall solid team, but then that's what you kind of expect from them because they're Red Bull's B team.
Exactly, yeah.
Although they are trying to distance themselves from being that, but that's essentially what they still are. If they are going to distance themselves from that, it's going to take time to progress. But again, all 4 drivers are under contract with Red Bull. It is essentially just somewhere where they can field all of their drivers.
Exactly, yeah.
But yeah, who are you going to go up with next?
Let's go Renault.
Okay.
Another mixed fortunes. There's so many teams that just had... One had a pretty good race and one had disaster. Well, car mechanical issues. That was Ricciardo suffering the cooling issues, as you said. He was looking pretty good. He was having a fight with Vettel and finally looked like he had the pace advantage, and then the car just went. Yeah. And then Ocon, on the other hand, came home in 7th. Not bad.
P8.
P8. Which isn't bad, yeah.
Well, considering his return to the sport, it's a very good performance. We described it in the driver ratings as it was a tale of 2 halves in terms of he struggled early on to kind of adapt him back, but very quickly he got back on pace and he worked his way back up into the field. He certainly benefited, I think, on the hard compound later on, and also probably benefited from the retirements. But it wasn't a bad return to Formula 1. But I think, suppose, the real thing, it is going to take him a few races to kind of get up to scratch. But Ricciardo does look ahead of him.
Yeah. It
both
was
in qualifying and race.
And it was important to get those points considering where McLaren and Racing Point finished as well. So Renault, if they're going to have any chance of staying in that battle, points are going to be important.
Yeah, definitely.
Getting points in every race. Yeah.
Obviously, McLaren take advantage on that regards, but it's massively on there, and I think it is the midfield teams. This was amazing to kind of see in the race. It's what we all hoped for, and if you take out, we'll get on to Mercedes, but if you take out Mercedes and even Red Bull in terms of that, everyone else is pretty much on a level playing field. And even like the Haas, Alfa Romeo and Williams aren't too far afield that a good driver performance can even have them competing for points.
Exactly, yeah.
Because George Russell was genuinely on pace, running 12th for a long part of that race.
Completely on merit, yeah.
Which was incredible to see. A Williams, not just lagging around at the back, it was actually competing and he was actually racing other people. So that was brilliant to see. We'll move on to Racing Point next up. And, well, the big thing, it has to be said, is they were one of the big surprise packages when it turned up to testing in Barcelona. They turned up with, what is this, pink Mercedes. It was confirmed, I think we watched the notebook with Ted as well, that, even if teams put in a kind of dispute, protest about it, it's going to pass it because they've done it with every step of the FIA along it. And Tom Barsley, the FIA technical directive, or guy who looks at these type of things, says it's all clear and it's all okay. So it's all good to race. The only question is, how much can that Racing Point develop? This was clearly a clear sign from Racing Point. Get a short-term fix for what was meant to be a one-year solution to be at least competitive within 4th to 6th in the midfield. It certainly has enough to do that. But obviously the rule's pushing back to 2022, so it will now be interesting to see over the 2 years
how much they did to it.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see that. But their pace transmitted, they looked good in Friday practice. In qualifying, they looked good as well. Both drivers getting into Q3, which very impressive for Lance Stroll, considering his qualifying was there. But Sergio, what did he qualify? 5th, I think it was.
6th, I believe.
Did he finish? It was Bottas, Hamilton, Verstappen, Norris, Albon. Yeah, correct. It was P6 for Sergio Perez, but still very impressive for the Racing Points. And in the race, Sergio Perez and the Racing Points looked ahead of the McLarens. And the only reason they don't walk away with a podium from this weekend is very rare from that team. They got a strategy call wrong.
Yeah, it was a bit of a disaster. When they could have brought Perez in for fresh sets, they may have lost a position, but he would have been on fresh sets to attack at the end. But he went on to mediums when everyone went on to hards. And he just had to make them last for the whole race, which Checo does great. But when people pin at the end for fresh sets, you're going to always struggle. And he did make a driver mistake by speeding in the pit lane, which got him the 5-second penalty. But yeah, it was a bit of a mare at the end. But the car performance is looking really good for Racing Point.
Oh, absolutely. It really looks a positive platform. They didn't capitalise what they're most, obviously with Lance Stroll unlucky retiring with a racing problem, but he was genuinely fighting off and holding off Vettel and Ricciardo well up until that point that he had to retire. And actually Ricciardo retired before he could get past him, but Vettel managed to get past him. But he was genuinely showing good racecraft and good racing within it, and he was very unfortunate the fact that he had to retire with the engine. But coming into next week, if the reliability and the strategy goes right, I would expect both Racing Points to be very high up on those kind of point scorings, and maybe potentially both ahead of the McLarens, because I do genuinely think, as this currently stands, they are the quickest car in the midfield.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it goes in Austria round 2. But yeah, on to McLaren, I think. And Carlos Sainz, Lando Norris. P3 for Norris and P5 for Sainz. I always get confused with the Lewis penalty. But yeah, podium for McLaren again.
Lando!
Some fortunate Sainz got his podium in Brazil because of Sir Lewis and Albon incident, and Norris got his podium because of Sir Lewis Albon incident. But Norris deserved it completely. I do recommend going to watch the onboard of his final lap of the race, where he puts in the fastest lap to just get within the 5 seconds of Lewis Hamilton's time penalty. It is immense.
It's a flawless lap, isn't it? And it's amazing listening to the radio on that, because it's literally like, well, if any of you have ever played the F1 games, you know that you can flick between your ERS in terms of low, medium, high, overtake and hot lap. And he was being told, engineer, okay, use overtake out of turn 3 and all the way up to, or out of turn 2 all the way up to turn 3, whichever one it was in terms of that. But he was getting these kind of little kind of bits of advice, nailing every kind of, hitting every apex that he needed to do. It was a really top kind of quali lap essentially by that time on those tyres, and it was incredible that he came up with it. Sainz, again, a very solid, consistent performance. Struggled to kind of get past Charles Leclerc. He had the chance at the safety car to do it, but wasn't able to do that. And I do think the McLarens were quicker than the Ferraris. So he's probably a bit of a shame that he wasn't able to do that. But Lando Norris, fantastic qualifying performance to get P4. Got promoted with Lewis Hamilton's penalty pre-race, up starting in P3 and finishing in P4, but promoted with Lewis's penalty into the podium position. What an incredible drive by him. Yeah. And, you know...
completely deserved as well.
Absolutely. And everyone was fearing about McLaren's race pace. But they held their own against the Racing Points. And they definitely held their own against the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. Norris just drove a very consistent and solid race. And it was incredible maturity, because his qualifying's always been good, but his racing craft has maybe been into question, especially his first half of his career. But now he just looks like such a good driver. He really does.
Looking forward to see what he could do next week.
Absolutely. So should we move on to Ferrari or Red Bull?
Ferrari, the third fastest team. You would have thought last season. Will they be in our top 3 at the end of this season? Yeah, we'll go Ferrari.
Okay, so Ferrari. Turn up Friday. They're slow. Are they sandbagging? Turn up Saturday. Vettel out in Q2 on genuine. Made some slight mistakes on the lap, but genuinely wasn't quick enough.
Normally, you can make some slight mistakes in those Ferraris and get away with it.
Charles Leclerc can only qualify, well, he qualified P7 in the end.
Yeah.
But
we just got into Q3, got P10 in Q2, so you only just scraped through. Then P7 in Q3.
And, you know, and Ricciardo, who had been quicker than him in every other session to date in qualifying, got held up on his quickest lap by the Bottas yellow flag incident, which...
by the lawnmower.
We'll come on and talk about that when we get onto Mercedes in terms of talking the weekend. But Sebastian Vettel, he's not in a happy place. He came out in the press conference on Thursday saying that he was never offered a contract by Ferrari, and he seems like someone who is really pissed off at Ferrari. If you've seen onboards of Sebastian Vettel, that car looks absolutely horrendous to drive. Like, it was oversteering, it was understeering. He was like turning in to goes on the corner and the back end would just kick out, and he's having to fight the car even through those fast speed corners of 6, 7 and 8. From there, the car basically looked undrivable, especially in the early laps. But yeah, it was a horrible weekend, and it was another weekend with a driver error from Sebastian Vettel.
Yeah.
That incident with Carlos Sainz, he broke, was going too fast, went to turn to the inside, locked up. Carlos Sainz ahead, clearly ahead, and closes the door. Vettel bumps into him, spins around, and unfortunately, you then see the load of spinning jokes about Sebastian Vettel resurface again. And it's sad because he's a 4-time world champion and he's becoming a little bit of a butt of a joke.
Yeah.
And it's so sad to see with Sebastian Vettel. And I think Everything Racing Podcast, Rob, I saw on Twitter, you know, he's a Ferrari fan. He's a big Sebastian Vettel fan. And he said, you know, I'm saying this from a guy who's defended Sebastian all the way. I think he should retire. And I don't know if it's getting to that stage, but he certainly, we were talking about, you were saying, you think he just needs a break from F1.
I kind of hope he takes that break. I don't want to see him completely, I would like to see him come back because he is a quality driver. But I think he needs that break. I think this Ferrari stint, ever since 2018, it's just gone downhill, 2017. Yeah, mentally, I think he just needs that rest.
He needs that rest, and you can say obviously that he's had a 7-month rest, but I think he needs a rest from the Ferrari environment. Obviously, there was a lot of uncertainty in his future. He would have been told during that break that Ferrari basically don't want him anymore, which must feel pretty crap because, you know, it's his childhood dream to drive for this team. He's given everything for that team, and then he's been cast aside by like a gone off bit of fruit or something like that. He's just been chucked aside, and it is sad to see him. Ferrari certainly haven't handled the situation well, and he doesn't look like he's going to get a chance to have a fairy tale end in terms of a shot at a world title, because that Ferrari car looks dreadful, and genuinely, as things stand, it is the 5th fastest car. The Racing Points and McLaren's for me are both ahead of it, and potentially even Renault, because we never really got to see how quick Daniel Ricciardo was in that Renault.
Yeah.
And
like just before his engine went, I think he was about to overtake Vettel and start hunting down Leclerc.
Absolutely. But I think by saying that, it makes what Charles Leclerc did even more impressive.
On the other side of the garage, he's sitting there with 2nd place from nowhere. You'd say from their qualifying performance and from good parts of the good chunks of the race, they're not going to get anywhere near that podium. And Charles Leclerc makes the moves on McLaren's Perez, gets within those 5 seconds of Lewis Hamilton, secures 2nd. Again, runner-up in Austria. We know he loves the track, clearly, but he should never have been there in that car.
But 2nd in Austria, last year would have felt like a major loss. This year feels like a major triumph.
Yeah.
Like, when you talk about the great drivers in Formula 1, and a lot of people are tipping Charles Leclerc to be, in the future, one of those names that go in the history books that, you know, they're the guys that you go, wow, what a legend of F1. And he's got a long career to come, and we've got to see how it all plays out. But performances like he did in Austria, honestly, I don't think it's kind of been given credit enough for what it is, because people just expect Ferrari to do well and get on the podium. This is an incredible performance. This is like one of the greats of F1, pulling and extracting something out of a terrible car and managing to maximise the performance out of it, and then some. Getting P2 is absolutely incredible.
It was like, and Charles Leclerc's in 3rd? It was like, how's this happened? Because he was stuck behind the McLarens and Perez for so long off the race. But I think they got a good pit stop under the safety cars, got some fresh tyres, and he just put the laps together. It was great.
With everything with this, so obviously he's benefited from an element of luck. The safety cars in coming in, being on the softer, being one of the cars to change onto the softer compound and taking advantage of Racing Point's fault, and obviously taking advantage of the Lewis Hamilton 5-second penalty. But that's F1. You've got to be in the position to take advantage of these. And, you know, both Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc, just incredible drives to kind of get those amazing results for their respective teams.
Exactly. On to the next team, the team that was going to challenge Mercedes, Red Bull, the only ones that were near the pace of those cars. Lap 14, heartbreaking moment. Well, even if you don't like Max, it was that he was the biggest challenge for Mercedes. Has that electrical problem. Car keeps going into anti-stall and something went wrong in the computer and he had to retire. And it was at that point you go, it's just going to be Mercedes' day. 1-2 miles ahead.
Oh, they did not know what was going to happen.
Oh, safety car, safety car, safety car. Alex Albon, fresh set on his softs. He'd been going, he was in solid third. He was keeping, had the pace advantage on the McLarens and racing points, but wasn't really closing the gap on the Mercedes despite, well, we'll come on to their technical issues. But safety cars brings him right onto the back of Lewis and Bottas. Fresh set of softs. Oh, he makes the move. He's right on the back of Lewis going into turn 4. Goes on the outside, going around, just gets ahead of Lewis, and it's Brazil 2019. Contact. Albon spins onto the gravel, last place. Then retires from a mechanical issue. Who knows if that was anything to do with the contact or if it was going to happen anyway. But yes, a bit of a disaster for Red Bull. Team that looked hopeful. But yeah.
So we'll take this time, well, to talk about a couple of things. I know pre-race, if you weren't a Red Bull fan, there was a lot of hate for the team because they put in a protest against the stewarding decision of not kind of punishing Lewis Hamilton for speeding through a yellow flag when Valtteri Bottas went off during qualifying. Basically, on the 360 cam, a lot of you would have seen it on the F1 Twitter, on the F1 Instagram. It basically showed Lewis Hamilton driving, zoomed in on the yellow flag flashing as he drove past it, not lifting off as you can hear the engine, and, you know, just going through it. So F1 have really kind of buggered it up on their front. But this, apparently, so I was listening to Ted talk about it and why the decision came so late. And why a lot of people got upset because it came like on the 10th hour and they were so annoyed that it should happen. Look, it's a penalty. There is no argument about whether this is a penalty for Lewis Hamilton. The rules are the same. It's should the process be... That footage was on their Instagram that night. I don't care if suddenly that it might have been Red Bull playing a protest in terms of to the decision, reviewing this new evidence, and they were trying to make it as late as possible to try and unsettle Mercedes. But realistically, if Formula One media themselves are releasing that image that hasn't been shown to the stewards, that realistically should be kind of brought into it, isn't it? But
they should have addressed it the day before themselves.
Yeah, I saw a lot of hate towards Red Bull kind of making this decision and like going, well, they should just kind of build a faster car and not kind of get unfair advantages. I get that argument. I get the kind of anger. It feels frustrating because Red Bull at this stage seem to be protesting at everything over the course of the weekend. And it does go, stop moaning, stop whinging. But at the end of the day, this is the top level of sport. There is so much to lose and gain from these performances. First race of the season. Mercedes are such a well-oiled and kind of effective team. If they can find any chink in the armour to kind of give a benefit to Max Verstappen, their kind of lead main driver in the team, they're going to do it. And you can bet if the shoe was on the other foot, Mercedes would have done it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, you know, it happened in... And if we look, it's consistency. It happened in Mexico with Max when he got a 3-place grid drop and 2 penalty points for speeding through the yellow in Mexico after the Bottas incident. Again, funnily enough, causing the yellow. But, you know, it's one of those things. It was as a neutral in this, because I do say I have links and I have drivers I like and stuff, but overall, if I've seen a good race, I'm just happy with it is. I don't have any firm attachment to any team. As a neutral, it was disappointing that Max's car gave up on him, because at that safety car restart, it would have been fascinating to see Max Verstappen on the tail of those two Mercedes.
He looked like the only one that could properly challenge.
He did. He was keeping pace with Bottas. Obviously, a gap had developed, but he was on the slower compound.
Yeah.
But he was keeping in his margins to definitely challenge going on later in the race, and how things would develop, he definitely would have challenged. Alexander Albon, I think it was a show of naivety in terms of, it's my main weakness, I think, for him as a driver. I think in midfield cars, where cars who are accepting that the Red Bull is quicker, his racecraft is very good, because cars generally get out of the way. He can make attacking and aggressive moves. He can get by because drivers usually concede because they go, hey, this isn't my battle.
Yeah.
This is not there, that's fine. I haven't seen anything of his Formula One career to date of Alex Albon. People might say the Brazil restart from a safety car, I think he overtook Lewis Hamilton, that went from there. He's generally, as a whole, Alex Albon's racecraft is just lacking from those top guys at the moment. It doesn't mean that he won't have it, but this was another instant of this. He didn't need to make this move then. And at that point, he would have had DRS. The Mercedes, with their mechanical issues, were having to pull off. He was on not only one compound quicker, but two compound quicker.
And on fresh, because the Mercedes hadn't pitted their hard tyres. So they were worn hard tyres. He was on fresh, quickest tyres.
He just needed to be patient, and that podium will come. It was a very solid performance, and there should be nothing to take away from that. He was doing everything he could, but it's just his racecraft that's letting him down. And once he figures that out, you know, he could be a hell of a driver.
Yeah.
That's for sure. He keeps adapting to these situations, and I hope he does learn from this situation from there. And penalty, no penalty, we said on the live stream, I think it could go either way. The more I look at it, look, Hamilton leaves himself open to be penalised because he's the one who's made contact with Albon, and Albon was ahead. So therefore, he leaves the door open. But at the same time, Albon knows the risk.
Yeah.
It's a risky move to go on the outside.
Exactly.
And so you've got to bear the risk. If you go on the outside and it's on a closing corner when Lewis was ahead going into the corner and he overtakes mid-corner, look, it could argue either way. I'm probably leaning as no penalty, but I completely understand why it was given a penalty. And I think they will... Lewis won't necessarily learn too much from it. He pushes Nico Rosberg. I've seen him say Lewis is very good at operating in the grey area, and this is just one of those times where he actually has got penalised on it. But Red Bull, it was a what if weekend.
Well, yeah, just on Albon is a bit of a shame, because if he just held on for even a few laps to get the DRS assistance, you know, that turn 4 I think is one of the riskiest points to overtake on the outside, because there's no margin for error. If you touch the curbs, you're on the gravel, and there wasn't much room. Lewis didn't defend it at all, but there just isn't any room on the outside. And Albon himself said he was already thinking about Bottas. You know, did his concentration slightly slip in the move? You know, I don't know, but yeah.
It was just one of, a what ifs. They turned out they could have been very strong, put a lot of pressure on Mercedes, taken advantage of Mercedes' mechanical issues. It could have even potentially been a 1-2 for Red Bull in some certain circumstances.
Maybe,
but instead, they walk away with 0 points from the race weekend and trailing. And in a short season where we don't know how many races they're going to be, could be a very costly mistake.
Norris beats Albon to that first podium.
It's still unbelievable to imagine to it, but it was just absolutely fantastic. But we move on to the last team, which is Mercedes, and they've built an incredible car again. We knew at testing it looked quick. All weekend it was the quickest. No one can touch Mercedes in there. And
one lap pace,
nobody really can touch them in race pace either. No. Max would have to drive out of his skin every race to be having a sniff of
It's
anything.
a bit difficult to tell because he was keeping pace with Bottas.
But I think that's what Christian Horner said, that he could keep pace with one of the Mercedes, which was Bottas.
Yeah.
But Hamilton was
Lewis,
still
yeah.
on another level from that, and Hamilton was quicker than Bottas for the majority of the race. But Mercedes, well, first we had that drama that we talked about. Lewis Hamilton said he got that penalty just within an hour of the race starting, demoting him from the front row with Valtteri Bottas going down into P5, starting the race. Fantastic race. Mercedes were then leading 1-2. Hamilton was catching Valtteri Bottas after the Verstappen retirement and getting past Alex Albon, and it just looked like they were going to absolutely blitz it. But then team radio comes across that both have to kind of ease off and protect their gearboxes because they went in the red. And this is the real interesting one, I think, for next weekend, because well, Lewis said after the race, I think, he never bets against his team, and you wouldn't bet against Mercedes to fix this issue.
It's the only teams that could turn Psych around.
But it's going to be tough to turn what seems quite a fundamental issue around in such a short space, because they had to basically ease off. And there is no doubt in my mind, if Alex Albon hasn't gone off at that point and waited and was patient, I think he beats both of the Mercedes.
Yeah. I think he had the clear pace advantage. If he was quicker than Lewis, who had the less broken car than Bottas, then he was going to catch Bottas, especially under DRS.
Definitely, and this was a really interesting thing, and it just, Mercedes, Austria, we were saying it on a live stream, Australia kind of seems like a track that it's not too hard on the cars, it's quite an easy kind of ease into the season as a season opener, and this is usually about 8th or 9th season, so they've generally kind of ironed out any gremlins that the cars might have at this stage.
Yeah.
With Austria, a notoriously tough track on the cars, the whole grid was dropping like flies, and Mercedes proved that they weren't immune to that.
Yeah.
And it was refreshing to see, but it definitely helped in spicing up the race. Obviously, if you're a Mercedes, a Lewis Hamilton or Valtteri Bottas fan, you're not going to be happy about this. But again, as a neutral, it was really nice because it spiced and it brought everything up, and it led to us having kind of lots of action on the track. And it didn't mean that it still would have been a brilliant race without it, but it added that race onto an extra level that Mercedes weren't able to just run away with it after the safety cars.
Exactly. But we should say, as we're covering Mercedes, great, fantastic performance from Valtteri Bottas. We dominated that with Lewis Hamilton. But Bottas just got the job done. Got pole on the Saturday. He loves Austria. One of the few tracks he's quicker than Lewis. And kept out of trouble. Held off the pressure from Lewis Hamilton, who was quicker than him. Who Bottas was told his car was in a worse condition than Lewis's. Held off all that pressure. Held off the safety car restarts. Got the race win.
Yeah, it was a fantastic performance from Valtteri, it has to be said. And if Valtteri is going to have a chance, now, by the looks of it, the best placed person to beat Lewis Hamilton and stop him getting a 7th World Championship this season is Valtteri Bottas, because he's in that Mercedes that is also king. If Valtteri Bottas stands any chance of winning the World Championship, he needs to capitalise on the advantages and the weekends that things don't go well for Lewis. And he did that.
Yeah.
And that's what Nico Rosberg did in 2016. He took advantage of those few slip-ups and mechanical issues from Lewis Hamilton, and he made sure he was there to pounce and kind of come out on top. Valtteri, he knows he's better at Austria. He knows Lewis isn't necessarily the strongest or hasn't had the best of luck at Austria over the years. He's only won once there in the turbo hybrid era. Valtteri is going to have to win both these weekends to put some serious pressure on Lewis Hamilton, I think. And, well, that's 1 out of 2 done. Which, like you said, it was pretty much just a flawless weekend for Valtteri Bottas.
Spot on from him, yeah.
It was incredible. But that is the race as a whole, the F1. It was an absolutely incredible race, and that was looking at each of the teams. And it was interesting points, I think, for everyone. and it's given us our first idea of where all the teams are in pace in relation to each other and how the rest of the season might look, or at least these first 8 races might look for the teams.
Exactly, yeah.
So we're now going to have a quick note to the feeder series included in our race review podcast. Obviously, both F2 and F3 race this weekend. 2 races in both categories, a feature race for both F3 and F2 and a sprint race. The winners from this weekend were Oscar Piastri, won the F3 feature race. It was Callum Ilott who won the F2 feature race. The sprint race in F3 was won by Liam Lawson, a Red Bull Junior, and the F2 sprint race was won by F2 rookie Felipe Drugovich. And it was a fantastic return from the feeder series. I think from watching both of them, the feature races were better than both of the sprint races, as especially the F2 sprint race was heavily affected by safety cars, wasn't it?
It's about 4 of them in the end, I think.
And because there are so many cars on the grid in both F2 and in F3 in particular, you know, it was just kind of long trains of, and they're spec cars, of like these DRS trains and kind of trying to overtake and go there. But there were some good battles within, and there were some great performances from there. And for me, F3, it was a kind of seamless thing when Prema looked king again in F3. They are a team that consistently seem to be at the front of the F3 category, and it looks no different with Oscar Piastri obviously winning that first race, and both Logan Sargent and Vesti doing well across the weekend as well. In F2, it was king of the rookies, I think. Marcus Armstrong and Schwartzman had superb things. Dan Ticktum's first full season in Formula 2. He had a very strong showing from there. The 2 Red Bull Juniors didn't necessarily, they had weekends to forget in Sonoda and Daruvla.
One of the unluckiest men, Zhao.
Zhao and Giotto were definitely unlucky, but Zhao in particular absolutely dominated the F2 qualifying, was dominating the F2 feature race. Well, not dominating, but he looked favourite to win, and his car gave up on him. And then, he got hacked. He was running in the F2 sprint race, and Daruvla punted Giotto out of the regs, and
he had to take a void in action onto the gravel,
and which basically stuffed him for the rest of that race. So he was very unlucky, and he may be very unlucky overall because, you know, he's part of the Renault Academy, and there is an announcement meant to be come out on Wednesday, and it's someone that the Renault mechanics have worked before. So for me, that rules out Zhao getting the 2021 seat, which it seems a shame, because what's the point of having a junior academy if you're not going to promote those juniors to things? Yeah. But it's where Renault have a disadvantage to Red Bull and Ferrari, because they don't have a B team, so to say, or a second team in Alfa Romeo or AlphaTauri that they can bring those junior drivers in. And Zhao may suffer from that. It'd be interesting to see. But the performance of the weekend was Felipe Drugovich in MP Motorsport. Last year, in a Carlin team that struggled in Formula 3, he surprised a lot of people that he actually went straight up to F2 after his season. I think he might have finished 17th in Formula 3 last year. But he qualified in P2 in the feature race, and then started on pole for the sprint race, and then just kind of pretty much led the race. And it was a very assured performance from the young Brazilian for MP Motorsport, which I think was their first win in about 2 years. I was talking to David Noble about this, and he mentioned that, so correct me if I'm wrong on that one, David. But yeah, it was a fantastic performance from the young Brazilian. Yeah. Especially, you know, his only second race in F2, bringing home for a win.
Always good to see a Brazilian driver coming through the ranks.
It certainly is. Obviously, then country is forever associated with racing, with some legendary names in the sport who have flown the Brazilian flag. But that rounds up the little kind of feeder section of the podcast. We now round off our kind of race review podcast with driver of the day and what we kind of give the race as a rating. And the driver of the day for me Well, actually, I'll go for you. Who's it going to be?
Thank you. This is the toughest part of this. Driver of the day. I want 3. I just want to name the front 3 on the podium. Each of them had an incredible race in their own right. Leclerc fighting that Ferrari, Norris, McLaren podium, that final lap, and Bottas making his bid for the championship this year. I can't pick.
All 3 were incredible performances, and well, if you check out our driver ratings, the ratings definitely reflect that. For me, I am going to go with Charles Leclerc. I just think with how poor that Ferrari was, with all the poor publicity about it, Sebastian Vettel, all the drama that's going on, a very clear sign Ferrari committed to Charles Leclerc has heaped a load of pressure on that, well, under that young man's kind of shoulders, and
he delivered.
He stands up and he delivers. The Ferrari this weekend had no right to be on the podium, and he's finished in P2. And for me, Lando Norris, incredible, but I think the McLaren was good all weekend. It's still an impeccable drive from Lando Norris, like you said, and Valtteri Bottas, the Mercedes had the car. They're still brilliant drives in their own regards of what they had to do. But Charles is the only performance out of there that I would say is someone who's massively outperformed the car that they had.
Yeah,
that would be my one that I kind of lead
to. Yeah.
Stephen's gone for 3. I've gone for 1, Charles Leclerc. It'll be fascinating to kind of see who your guys' driver of the day was. But race rating.
10 out of 10.
Yeah.
You couldn't ask for more from a season opener, especially after such a long break. You had drama, you had controversy, you had a messed up podium. You had everything.
I think I literally put out a tweet going, F1, thanks for coming back. It like that. It had the drama, it had controversy, it had surprise, it had unexpected performances, it had disappointing performances. Literally everything that you could possibly hope for an F1 race was included in that. And to make it even better, it was the first race after an extended break, the longest break we've ever had between F1 seasons. And we were all buzzed. It could have been a poor race, and I think we still would have been like, oh, well, thank goodness it's back. Thank goodness F1 is back. But with that race, it was more than we hoped for and was just incredible to watch.
Yeah.
Loved it. Absolutely loved. From the start of the race to the end of the race was brilliant, I thought.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. That's nothing more. So, that rounds up the Race Review podcast. I hope you like the new format, and I hope you kind of like, obviously this is when everything's kind of settled. We took a deeper look with each team and talk about those main incidents within there. It is kind of, just a more relaxed look now, because if you were on us with the live stream, it was a little bit chaotic. It was definitely crazy in that front. But thank you for watching. We're going to be at it again next week. Make sure you join us tomorrow if you're keen on the F1 fantasy game, because we will be giving our Austria review and then obviously preview to the second race in this weekend. But yeah, it's been fantastic, guys. But if you're new around here or haven't done so already, Stephen, what can they do?
They can like, they can subscribe, and they can ding that bell.
Ding that bell. But that's it from me and Stephen today, guys. We hope you've enjoyed it. Make sure you get involved in those comments below, letting us know your thoughts on all those controversial incidents. Who's your driver of the day? What was your race rating? What were the surprise performances? Did you think we were wrong about anything? Get involved with the conversation down below in the chat. We love to hear from you guys. But that's it. So for now, you F1 fans, keep racing!